that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Why are there so few women in STEM? And why is this a problem? And of course, what can we do to change this? These are the questions that we will soon dive into. This seminar is part of our series Gender Equality in the 2020s that we do in collaboration between SNS and the Swedish Institute for Social Research, SOFI, at Stockholm University. We are very happy for this collaboration. My name is Linka Benson. I am CEO here at SNS, and I will be moderating this event. We're very happy to have Ardila Brenøe here with us from the University of Zurich, where you are an assistant professor of economics. And Anne's primary fields of research are education and labor economics, with a special focus on gender. And she will share a super interesting study done on Swiss girls and boys, and which is about their beliefs about their abilities in mathematics and their choices of apprenticeships, sort of vocational training during upper secondary school, so when they are teenagers. And after Anna's presentation, we will have Anna Sandberg Trolle-Lindgren, who is an economist at Stockholm University at SOFI. And she will put this study in a Swedish context, as well as share with us research about the gender segregation in the Swedish labor market. And after that, we will have a panel discussion. And during that, I really encourage you to participate in the dialogue with your questions and reflections. And if you are here, you just put up your hand and wait for a microphone. And if you are joining us online, you can write your questions or reflections in the chat whenever, and one of my colleagues will pick them up. So with those words, I would like to welcome Anna up on stage, and we're looking forward to hear about your research.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've been very much looking forward to participate in this event and to also learn more about the Swedish context. So I am working on this research project together with Melanie Wasserman, who is in California. And this is about math skills, perceptions of fit, and occupational choice. So we see across basically all labor markets across the world that there is a strong occupational segregation by gender. So men tend to sort into certain occupations and women into other occupations. And this sorting is very much on the dimension of the math content of the occupation, so how math intensive these occupations are. Yet, boys and girls have similar math abilities. So the sorting in terms of occupational choice cannot be explained by gender differences in ability. That cannot be the only reason, at least. So a key question is, what contributes to this gender segregation in the labor market? We know from previous evidence that this sorting has negative consequences. So we don't have an efficient allocation of talent in the labor market. So given boys and girls have similar math ability, some women or some girls would be very talented to go into high math occupations. And at the same time, it's not all boys who fit that well to high math occupations. They might be better off in occupations with lower math content. So we can think about these negative consequences both for the individual in terms of career progression and earnings, but also for the firm in terms of decreased productivity, and overall for society in terms of we are missing out on talented male nurses and talented female engineers. So how do we get closer to gender equality in the labor market where we improve the allocation of talent? So that's the key question. So in this project, we focus on the role of beliefs about math skills and fit in certain occupations. So this relates to the evidence, clear evidence we have seen across basically all countries that there is a gender gap in beliefs about own math skills. So we see that boys, they tend to be overconfident in the math skills, and girls tend to be underconfident in the math skills. At the same time, we also have this societal perception of fit, that one gender fits better to certain occupations than the other gender. So our research question is, do beliefs about math skills and fit affect occupational choice? So we study this in the Swiss setting. So we study the choice of occupation among Swiss teenagers who are about to choose what apprenticeship to do after compulsory education. So you should be thinking about 8th grade students. They are around 14 years old. So it's a young age. And this is a choice that is consequential for what they're going to experience in the labor market later on. So to answer this research question, we take a two-pronged approach. So we conduct a gender-specific intervention where we emphasize gender incongruent occupations. So for boys, concretely, this means that we emphasize that many boys would fit well into low math occupations. So these occupations are gender incongruent for boys. And then for girls, we highlight high math occupations. So you can be thinking about STEM occupations here. So we contribute to the literature and to our knowledge in terms of focusing on women's choice of STEM occupations, but also importantly, we focus on what boys choose, because of course there's scope for improving talent allocation in terms of having more girls, high talented girls choosing STEM studies, but it's not all boys who choose STEM today who have the best fit there. So we also, if we move some people to STEM occupations, we also need to meet the labor demands, for instance, in health and care occupations. So there are very few exceptions so far that have been focusing on this other part of the population. So we are not only focusing on girls, but also on boys. So this is also like a new term, HEAL, so health, education, administration, and literacy. So now I'll tell you a bit more about the specific setting that we study. I think it might be of interest for you because it is a bit different compared to the Swedish setting. So 2/3 of a cohort will do an apprenticeship in Switzerland, at least in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. So this is really the majority of students. It also means that it's not only the low ability students, it's really like students from the entire span of like the ability distribution. So early in 8th grade, students seriously start considering what apprenticeship to do after compulsory education, so after 9th grade. So they have a school subject that is devoted to this process, like they learn how to write a CV, search for information, think about what are their preferences, etc. And then it's also common to do several trial apprenticeships. So it's like 1 to 5 days that they try out a specific occupation at a specific company. And then in the summer between 8th and 9th grade, they start applying. So there is encouragement to try out different occupations, but there's really a lot. So there are more than 200 unique occupations they can choose between. And what we see is that students, they very much narrow down to just a handful of occupations that are typically very gender stereotypical, and then they explore those occupations. So they kind of don't consider the other part of the gender distribution in that, like when they consider these occupations. So it's the first experience with the labor market when they do an apprenticeship. So this is the dual apprenticeship type. So it will last 3 to 4 years, and they attend school 1 to 2 days per week, and then they work in this specific company 3 to 4 days per week. So they really start working and being part of this environment from the beginning. And then we also see that I think an important part of this system is also that an apprenticeship is not like the end of their educational career. So 5 years after graduating with an apprenticeship, almost half of the students they are doing some further education. So they go to University of Applied Sciences to become a physiotherapist or primary school teacher, etc. So it's like there are many bridges, there are many opportunities for further education. So for this study, we recruited students for an online study. So these are students who are searching for apprenticeships in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. So we recruited through different channels, primarily through an online platform that posts apprenticeship positions in collaboration with firms. And it also has a lot of information about apprenticeships, tips to apply, how to apply, etc. And then we also recruited students through schools. So in total, like we have almost 4,000 students in our sample. So I just want to give you some very brief descriptive feelings of like the setting. So first of all, when we look at these students' math skills in terms of their grades, we see no gender difference in the math skills that they have. But boys are much more interested in occupations that have higher math requirements. So there's a very big difference in what boys and girls prefer. We also see that even very high talented girls are very unlikely to have a preference for a high math occupation. And boys with low math skills, they still have a very big interest in high math occupations. So this suggests some mismatch. It might have the consequence that they are not able to find a contract, or at least in the occupation they want. We also know from other sources that it's not a negligible share of students that drop out of an apprenticeship. So there is scope for improving this match. And we also see that there are big gender gaps in the beliefs about fitting well to high math occupations and having good enough math skills for these occupations. So this all motivates our experimental design, or our experiment. So we randomize students. So they do our online, or start our online survey, fill in a few questions, and then we randomize students into which video they watch. So they watch a video of a bit less than 2 minutes. So you should be thinking about a light touch intervention. And here, so it's like random which video they watch. The control group watch a video that is publicly available. It has tips on how to write a CV. And then the treatment video provides the key message that many boys or many girls would fit well into gender incongruent occupations. I will show you a bit more on the next few slides on this intervention. So then after they have watched the video, we ask them some questions immediately after about their beliefs, about their own fit and their math skills, and also their occupational interest. Then 2 weeks later, we follow up with them and ask what occupations they have been searching for and what they are planning to apply for. And now we are conducting our endline survey, where we then, 1 year after, ask them what occupation they are going to do after 9th grade. So we did the intervention last school year, and now most of them have a contract. This is still ongoing, so I just have preliminary evidence, but I will share some of it with you. And then later we will also know what applications they have actually sent, like what they have applied for, but unfortunately we still don't have that data. So the boys' intervention. So I know we're focusing on girls, but I still wanted to sneak in this. So what do we do in this video? So we first say that boys and girls have similar math ability, but many boys overestimate their math skills. So it means that the math skills might not be good enough for high math occupations. But employers are not only valuing math skills, they also value social skills and communication skills. So many boys would fit well into and be successful in occupations with low math requirements, in particular in health and care jobs. And then we provide them a list of 6 different occupations that could be worth for them looking into. So that's like the key message in this video. So now the question is, what is then the effect of providing this information? So we see that providing boys the information that they would fit well into low math apprenticeships increases their beliefs of their own fit and also other boys' fit in low math occupations. So now they actually think that not only do other boys fit well or better to low math occupations compared to what the control boys say, but they actually also think that they themselves would fit better to these occupations. There's no effect on how they perceive themselves fitting into high math occupations. So it's more like improving, like increasing the horizon of what they think would be a good fit. We also, in line with the treatment message, see that now they think, so treated boys think that their math skills are not as good to these high math occupations compared to the controlled boys. And here we also decrease the rate of overconfidence. So we see an increased interest in low math occupations. So both from incentivized measures immediately after this intervention, they're more interested in actually trying out low math occupations. And then 2 weeks after, we see that they are almost 50% more likely to have searched for information about low math occupations. So they are actually encouraged so much that they really try to search for information, like on the internet, or they might have talked to someone about it. And we also see an increase in low math, like boys with low math skills in their intentions to apply for low math occupations. So as I said, we have some preliminary evidence on what they are now actually gonna do. It's still very preliminary, but what we see is that the treated boys, they are actually more likely to have done a trial apprenticeship in a health and care occupation. They're more likely to have applied for an occupation in health and care, to have received an offer, and also there is some indication that they're also more likely to have a contract, but we're still collecting more data. So now the girls' intervention. So we start similar to the boys' video by saying that boys and girls have similar math ability, but many girls underestimate their math skills. So this means that most girls never seriously consider high math occupations, not even when they are just considering what trial apprenticeship to do. So many girls would actually fit well into and be successful in high math occupations. And we then list 6 different occupations. So for instance, IT and laborant, and other occupations that we think would be a good fit for these girls. And then we end saying that math and language skills complement each other. So if you are good at math, but maybe even better in language, a high math occupation might still be a good choice for you. So what are now the results for the girls? So providing this information that many girls would fit well into high math occupations, similarly to the girls, or to the boys' video, now improves or increases their beliefs in their own fit to high math occupations, so gender incongruent occupations. And it also increases the probability of them thinking that other girls would fit well into these occupations. What was not intended by the video is that now actually these treated girls think that their math skills are worse than what the controlled girls think. So this is like the message in the video was girls actually underestimate the math skills. We don't have like clear reason or very clear explanation for this, but what several people have suggested to me independently is that it might be some priming effect, that we are talking about girls and math, and that might be like negative. But we don't really see that this effect is sustained over time. But there might, so that's just important to think that when you give some information, there might be some unintended things going on. But we see here also in the short run that these girls seem to be more interested in high math occupations, especially when we look at what occupations they have searched for during the 2 weeks after the intervention. So they are now 35% more likely to have searched for information about high math occupations. There's not so much in terms of what their plans are to apply, maybe some indication. But then when we now have collected our preliminary evidence on what they're actually going to do, there doesn't seem to be an effect. So it doesn't seem to be that this intervention has increased girls' interest in high math occupations. So I have some potential reasons for that. Like, we know that there has been a lot of this messaging over time. So I think it might be because this information that we gave to girls was not so new, because when we promote educational programs in STEM, we kind of always now have a picture of girls, and like we talk about a lot that girls in STEM, so that might be a reason why there was not so much bite of this intervention, while the message for boys might have been very new for most of the boys. It's not like publicly available that boys would fit well into health and care jobs. So just to conclude here, we conducted this very low cost intervention focusing on gender incongruent occupations. We see changes in students' beliefs about their own and others' fit into gender incongruent occupations. And we also see increases in their search behavior. So now they're more interested in searching for information, which is, of course, the first step to attract students to non-considered occupations. So they first need to inform themselves more about these occupations. This is a very brief intervention, so we could think of expanding this to like a whole school class, or maybe incorporate that in the curriculum, which I think we will maybe hear a bit more about with girls in STEM. So like, then I think this is interesting to see, like when we just have this very brief intervention, there is actually a change in beliefs. If we would expand the scope of it, it might have a bigger effect. So what are the implications? So first of all, this notion of fit is malleable. So we can actually change students' perceptions about what is a good fit for them. And there is clearly potential for improving the skill match. So attracting students with certain skills to occupations that fit those skills.
And now I would like to welcome Anna up on stage. And well, come on. And your primary fields of research are applied microeconomics and behavioral economics, with a focus on the importance of gender and family background for equality in the labor market, among other things. So we're very interested in hearing your comments, and also from the Swedish perspective.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Anne, for a great report and a super interesting presentation. So I want to start by taking a step back and saying something about Sweden and the Swedish labor market and education system. So as you probably all know, Sweden is not different from other countries in this respect. We have still a very gender segregated labor market. So according to one common measure, we usually say that in order for the distribution of men and women to become completely equal on the labor market, around half of all employed women or men would have to switch occupations, which is a lot. And this is very interesting because this gender segregation is often put forward as one of the most, or the most important contributor to the gender wage gap. But it's not all bad. Gender segregation has decreased a lot, by about a third during the past 50 years. And interestingly, I think this is something one should keep in mind. This decrease has almost entirely been driven by women who have entered previously male-dominated occupations. So the largest occupation in Sweden for women is assistant nurses in elderly care, which is composed of almost 90% women, while for men, the most common occupation is as a software or system developer, and this is an occupation category consisting of around 80% men. When it comes to upper secondary education, gymnasieutbildningen, we see by far the strongest gender segregation in the vocational programs, in the yrkesförberedande programmen. So this graph shows the 5 largest vocational programs in Sweden, and the gender distribution in these programs. So the dark bars indicate girls and the light bars indicate boys. So we can see that 2 of these programs are dominated by girls, the health and social care program and the child and recreation program. 3 of these programs are heavily dominated by boys. In the vehicle and transport program, we see 80% boys, the building and construction program, 89% boys, and the electricity and energy program, almost no girls, 96% boys. When it comes to the programs that are preparatory for higher education, and these are the programs that most students choose, these are much more gender integrated. So as you can see, in these programs, we usually have between 55 and 65% girls, except for one case, technology or engineering, maybe I should say, teknikprogrammet, where we still see 81% boys. So when it comes to engineering at the university level, we see that the share of women has increased steadily over time and is continuing to increase. So this graph shows the share of women among engineers in university from the 1980s until today. But it should also be said that sort of hiding behind these statistics are quite substantial gender differences between different specializations. So for instance, we see that within IT, software, electronics, we have only 18% women, while in samhällsbyggnad, which includes, for instance, architects, we see 55% women. So this is something to keep in mind when we see these sort of broader statistics. So next, I want to say something about women in male majority environments. So basically, if we shift these women and girls into male majority environments, into, for instance, STEM occupations, what happens then? So we know from a lot of previous research that being in numerical minority, that is being one, like the only woman or one of very few women surrounded by many men, can have a negative impact on women's well-being and performance in the workplace. And this fact in and of itself may actually contribute to the leaky pipeline that we observe in STEM. That is the tendency for the share of women at every stage in the career path to decrease. So I want to give you 2 concrete examples of this. And the first example comes from a recent report by Johanna Rickne and Ole Folke on sexual harassment in the workplace. So this graph shows on the horizontal axis the share of men in the workplace, and on the vertical axis the share of employees who report that they have been sexually harassed. So the round transparent dots are women and the dark triangles are men. So first, it's clear that women are more likely than men to experience sexual harassment in the workplace, but also, it's very clear that women are substantially more likely to be exposed to sexual harassment in workplaces with a large share of men. And the authors of this report really put forward that this could be one potential cause for women to both shy away from and also eventually leave male majority workplaces. So the second example is from Swedish upper secondary education, gymnasiet. So this graph shows the share of students who, after their first year of studies at upper secondary education, change programs. They drop out of the program they initially started and change to a different program. And again, the dark bars are girls, the light bars are boys, and this graph only shows the statistics for the male-dominated vocational programs. Building and construction, electricity and energy, vehicle and transport, HVAC and property, and industrial technology. And you can see for these programs, girls are much more likely to drop out after initially starting the program than boys. And this is not the case if you look at this corresponding statistics for more gender integrated programs or for the programs that are dominated by girls. This seems to be something specific to the programs that are dominated by boys. Okay, so this sort of really begs the question, if we get more girls and women to choose STEM educations and careers, what happens then? What happens to them in the long run? And I think it's not sort of far-fetched to assume that various efforts to attract girls and women to STEM are most efficient if they're also combined with other efforts to retain them in the long run. And finally, I also could not resist to say something about the boys, even though the topic of today is girls in STEM. So just like Anne said, during the past years, we've seen numerous interventions to shift girls into STEM. I just Googled really quickly and I found all these different initiatives. It's sort of, there's a lot of interesting things going on right now to attract women and girls to STEM. But what about the boys? We know that the decrease in occupational gender segregation over time has primarily been due to women who pursue sort of male-dominated careers, right? But still, the largest welfare professions today remain completely female-dominated. The largest occupation in Sweden today, with 130,000 employees, is assistant nurse in elderly care. And this is an occupation consisting almost entirely of women. How do we get men to pursue these occupations? So this is one of my favorite things actually about today's report, that they really sort of, they test this symmetrically, both for boys and girls, and really show that it seems to be possible to shift boys' interests towards non-stereotypical career paths just through like a super cheap and simple information intervention, which is really cool. But I'm also wondering whether this would work as easily for occupations with lower wages and less favorable work conditions, which is unfortunately, the case when we look at these female majority welfare professions today. Thank you.
So we have a couple of minutes or 5 minutes for questions directly to the researchers before I invite our panel up. Do you have any questions now for Anne or Anna? Yes, wait for a microphone.
Thank you. I have a question, maybe, I don't know, each of you. It's about, can we see is there any research on the result of when we have gained to bring more females into the male-dominated work positions? Is there any research on the results of it? What have they contributed to that?
So that's a very good question. So
would it be better or not?
So one first thing is that often, so that as Anna showed, there are many programs trying to attract girls to STEM programs, and very often they are not evaluated, so we don't know. And that's, as researchers, this is a big wish that we would actually evaluate these things, that we would give this information or coding camp or whatever, like what that program is, to some girls and not to other girls, and then really see if it changes their perceptions about themselves, their choices in the end. So a lot of information we don't know, but there has been evaluations, of course. And so broadly speaking, some programs seem to work with different messaging. But there are also many things that doesn't work, right? I think so. It's not, as for instance, what I presented that now we will see, need to wait a bit for the final results, but it's not just giving information always that will give be the solution. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. So, I mean, as a researcher, this is maybe something you always say, but I think particularly for this question and this field, we need to implement policies and programs in a way that make it possible for us to systematically evaluate what works and what does not work, because otherwise it's sort of very difficult to move forward and say anything really. And that's why this report is such a great sort of step in that direction, I think.
And Anna, is there any research about, because you said that the changes, the shifts in gender segregation towards less gender segregations are driven by women entering in previously male dominated occupations. Is there any research of what has happened to those occupations and the women there?
I mean, so it's a tricky question to sort of identify in a causal way. I think, so one interesting thing that my colleagues are looking at now is sort of how the work environment, how sort of the, if you will, the niceness, how trevligt workplaces, how that sort of differs according to gender composition. And it really seems like both men and women think that workplaces with more women in them are sort of nicer, which may sort of indicate that this is almost like a non-paid task that women contribute in the workplace to sort of, you know, make it nicer. But this is, as I said, this is just, you know, a hypothesis.
But also related to what we said, that like we don't know the effect of many programs because they have not been evaluated. But if you remember this nice trend that Anna showed with the share of engineers or female engineers, we see that over the past decades that the share of women has increased. So it must be that some of these programs have worked, right? We just don't know which initiatives. And this is very important because it's not cheap to have a several weeks coding camp for girls in the summer vacation. So if that particular coding camp doesn't work, we might want to do other things.
So we have a question over here.
Yes, thank you. My question is high math profitable? So if you are, for example, a high math individual, if you are a female high math individual, will you make more money going into a high math education because of the skills? And at the same time, is a low math male who goes into a high math profession, does he perform better? So is it profitable to go into high math?
That's a very good question. So I do not have like the clear causal estimates here, but if we think about it, like first step is that you need to complete your education. If your skills don't match the skill requirements, you're not gonna complete it. Or maybe you complete it, but then you are gonna get the lower ranked positions. So you can think about it in different steps, like completing your education, but then also progressing, like thriving in the career. And that is, of course, related to your earnings over time. So that is like what I can say. But what Anna also brought up was like, how are men or women paid in health and care occupations? And in the Swiss context that I study, they are well paid. So it's not like telling boys that they should go into a low paid occupation. And this is of course different in other countries, which is also an important consideration of that choice.
Would you like to add something, Anna?
Yeah, no, I think in the Swedish context, this is sort of particularly striking when it comes to the vocational programs, where you sort of, you take this vocational upper secondary program and then you start working right after. And there we see these sort of huge differences in wages between the female dominated programs. They become assistant nurses compared to these sort of male dominated programs. So there, you know, there seems to be like a huge wage penalty of entering these sort of stereotypically female career paths.
One last question, and I forgot to say, please introduce yourself and continuously.
Anastasia from Skills Shift Initiative. I just recently came back from the United States where I did the US State Department program on inclusion in STEM. And I was representing Sweden. And there we learned a lot around the country about the early exposure to STEM. So my question when I listened to very interesting study, I believe, thank you so much. What do you think, or have you thought about doing the same intervention much earlier, around the age of 8 years old, and making it like, would be very interesting to hear your impression, because I got impression that back in States, they started way much earlier, which gives on a long run a different impact. And it's not only about how profitable it will be for society, but also how diverse can we get, both tech, pharma, other industries. So it's not maybe only about profitability, but also how diverse is those areas. Thank you so much.
I would love to do that study. As a researcher, it's much more difficult because we need to follow the students over a very long time. So we need more research funding. But I completely agree. I think this is really important, because, and not even at age 8 years. It's like in preschool, because we know that interest and perceptions and self-confidence is shaped throughout childhood. It's not only once you're making the choice. So we need to foster the curiosity in all fields. And like here, technology is one, but also like telling boys that they also have emotions, for instance. So so this is something that is throughout.
Okay, thank you very much. You can have a pause, and I would like to bring up our panel. You can come up, all of you. Sara, will you stand here, and then Anna and Katarina. So I will start by presenting you, of course. Sara Anvarsson is the second vice president of Engineers of Sweden, Sveriges Ingenjörer. And you're also CTO, Chief Technology Officer at Lexi, which is a non-profit, and you work with literacy for school children and providing free tools that are evidence-based. So very good, especially in this environment. We're welcome. And then we have Anna Söderman, who is a global HR business partner for R&D, as well as HR Sweden lead at AstraZeneca. Yes. Very welcome to you.
Thank you.
And Lundahl, who is a newly appointed, semi-newly appointed State Secretary to the Minister of Schools, Lotta Edholm. Very welcome to you as well. And I would like to start with you, Sara, from your perspective, both as representing Sweden's engineers, but also I know that you have been working with this kind of intervention since you yourself were a child, or a teenager at least. What are your reflections on this research and on your own experiences from bringing in girls and children to STEM?
Well, I just want to start say thank you for doing this research, because I agree with you that I feel that we are lacking in research in this area, specifically like well done research. So this is very welcoming to get some more data on it, because we have in Sweden been working with these questions for very many years. And we have seen the share of women engineers going up, but we also see now for the last 2 decades that it's sort of stabilizing. So I don't want to draw too far conclusion based on one study, because we have to look at the evidence, but I think it is interesting to see how quickly you can change perception with very, very minor interventions, even if they're not sustained over time. So I think there's something there, and that's something we also seen working with different interventions, that I think, the gut feeling seems to be for boys to go into technology, and the gut feeling for girls to go into heal, more healthcare literacy. And by doing hands-on experience, by giving the students the opportunity to actually try it out, we can see that that's starting to change maybe their own perception, because it's very similar in Sweden. Like the math is the same. Girls and boys are equally good at math, but yet when we come to upper secondary school and making the choice, the amount of girls going into STEM areas is much, much, much lower, which I think is a call for starting early. I agree with you. I think we cannot wait until they start making the active choices, because by that point it's far too late. We have to start much, much earlier, and there's a lot of things that can be done there. I can keep on talking.
Yeah, but we come back to so Anna, AstraZeneca works very actively with attracting children to STEM subjects, both I think both school children and in students and in upper secondary school. And AstraZeneca also, as an employer, you work very actively with and systematically with the gender balance. So what are your reflections on this research?
Yeah, so very interesting. And even though it's early with the results, it seems like this intervention is giving a positive result. So I guess what we need to do then is start much earlier. And then also what you also show, if we see, you know, that we don't retain the females in the more male-dominated educations. I'm really interested in to see, you know, what could we do that has proven effective to retain them as well, so that they don't drop up and drop out and we lose them. Because it's great if we can attract them and prime them to start thinking differently, but I think we also need them to have some proven actions, what we can do to retain them and keep them, not only through their education, but also obviously when they come to us as an employee, how do we make sure that we retain them within this area as an employee?
How do you do that?
Yeah, we first of all, we need to attract them. So we work a lot with attracting them. And then we have worked a lot internally with also retaining them by creating different development opportunities, having role models with females on senior levels showing it's possible, and creating different forums where females can kind of collaborate and thrive together. So different actions internally, but we have also a lot of actions to just by attracting the females to us to make sure that we get an even or quite even base from a gender perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. And Katarina, I know that the Swedish government is now working on a national STEM strategy, which will sort of reform the whole education system from preschool to higher education. So what are your reflections on these studies and the research that Anna presented?
Well, the basis for, or the reason for our STEM strategy is that we need more both boys and girls actually to educate themselves in this field. We are a country of engineers, and we need more engineers. We need more people who have abilities in tech and in many other STEM fields. But to reach that goal, of course, women is of a particular interest, since the women with high math skills choose other subjects, while the high qualified boys already choose these subjects. So the pool is larger among women. And therefore, of course, when we look at work with forming this strategy, we have to look very carefully how to increase both the capabilities of boys all the way from sort of lower education and up, but also to make women want to go into these occupations. So we have to work on several fronts. But I think the field that this study explores of the perceptions, I think it is an important part of the puzzle, but it's also a quite difficult path. As you've mentioned, it's difficult to know what works and what doesn't work, and it's not always the government that has the tools to shape the perceptions of students.
So, I mean, I think we sort of agree on the problem, but I would like to, you said that, or a problem or sort of a purpose or a goal for the government is to increase the young people who choose STEM subjects generally. Do you agree? Is the problem that too few women choose STEM occupations, or that too many or the wrong men do it, or what is the root problem here?
I think with the complex problems, there are many roots. But of course, if we want more people to go into STEM, one path is to work with attracting female students. We have looked into, so I like that you call the technology program the engineer program, because that's also a little bit how we see it. We see that most women that choose to go into engineering will come from the technology program. However, there is very few women who decide to, girls, I guess, decide to go into that. It's only 3% is decreasing. And so we looked into, from Swedish engineers, like, what are the regions in Sweden that are successful in this? Because it varies a lot. There are some municipalities where there's 0% women or girls choosing the technology program, and other parts where it's 10% of all girls in the area who choose the technology program. And we've seen, so this is correlations, it's not causation. I'm not saying that these are the reasons, but what we can see is there are 3 things that are correlating. Number one is whether the technology program is offered within the municipality. If it's not, but other programs are offered, we see that the girls tend to choose the other programs. They don't travel to do the technology program. We can also see that if there are a lot of engineers in the area, if it's like part of an industrial cluster, if there are a lot of local role models, that has a positive benefit. And then lastly, we can also see that when there is a local collaboration between local government, companies, and education, in Sweden it's called Teknik College. So it's local and regional cooperation. That also has a positive impact on how many girls will choose technology. Yeah.
Anna, what would you like to add from AstraZeneca's perspective?
No, but I think you're right. It's several different things that we need to do. And I also think that this collaboration across is really important, and that we early show the girls what kind of different career paths there could be within the STEM area. Mm. So it's not limited, but actually opening the doors. And there we as a company can obviously contribute and invite the girls to us, which we also do, to show the different career paths that could be within the area, and also to meet with, for example, female engineers who talk about their job and what you actually do as an engineer, and create some awareness and curiosity for the area. I think that's, yeah. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I realized that I had a different thought as well, because, I mean, there is a different way that we can increase the amount of students coming into STEM, right? We can work with how good they are, like how good is their math? Because we can see that already when you choose upper secondary school, 15% of the students in Sweden are not eligible. Like we're losing 15,000 kids every single year. Like how people are not more upset about that, I don't understand, because to me that is a big problem. And we can see that already, like by 3rd grade, there is a big variety in the grades in math that has very much to do with the educational background of the parents. Mm-hmm. So already by 3rd grade, it's late. So I think that there is much to say about sort of increasing the math skills for all students, not only for like the engineer, but also so that you're eligible to come into upper secondary school and you can choose different professions there.
So Katarina, the sort of general quality of education, yeah, in schools.
No, but I completely agree. And that's why this government focuses also a lot on increasing the math abilities all through the educational system, and not at least at the young age, together with the abilities to read and write in Swedish.
And how are you doing that? What are the sort of concrete measures?
Many things that we will try to do during this mandate period. It's things like more time in the classroom, training for the teachers, regulating sort of the time teachers have to teach and to prepare their teaching, and also to take away administrative burden so that they actually have time to teach. So different, and also in all sort of the curriculums and other things, focus on knowledge and skills, and to go back to classroom teaching, not the children to teach themselves. So it's sort of which in some ways have, I mean, there are always trends in how a classroom should work, and where we think we should go back more to sort of more classical classroom teaching. So those are a few of the things that we are currently doing.
So Anna and Sara, I know that both of you have experiences with this kind of interventions, summer school for STEM subjects and young researchers tutoring children. And you also told me that when you went to school, you started some kind of STEM club or something. Have these programs been evaluated?
Yes, of course, they've been evaluated by asking the students who's taken part of them if they enjoyed it, by looking at if they're coming back. But it has not been evaluated with our RCT study, which I do think is a flaw. I think that's something that we should try and do as well. I fully agree with you. But I do think, I mean, there is many ways of evaluating something if it's successful. Did the person enjoy the week? I mean, that's one measure of success, I guess, in one way. But whether it made them more likely to go into engineering, I have not evaluated, no.
You put a lot of resources in your summer forskarskolan, for example. Do you do this kind of more evaluation of the effects on longer term?
No, we don't. So we don't have the statistics, how many stay in the STEM area and continue their studies and then work within the STEM area. We don't have that data, but obviously we do the same evaluation after the summer research school, and that it has been, you know, fruitful for the participants, and hopefully they then also talk positive about these topics with their friends and families, and, you know, spread the good word, and that it creates some kind of positive feeling around the area. But we don't have the data long term if it has actually given a long-term effect.
I mean, I did the summer research school and I became an engineer, so I have one data point.
We have some proof here then.
Yeah.
So Anna also brought up what happens when you get out in the labor market as a woman and you end up, or you go to a male dominated workplace, and sort of implying that it might be for sort of good reasons that women don't do that, since they are more likely to face sexual harassment and other things that are not pleasant. What are your sort of comments to that, those results?
Well, because we managed to get the amount of women applying to engineering up to 30%, today there is more than 60,000 educated female or women engineers. So I think, I mean, that is becoming not less of a problem, but there are more women out there. So I think, like, also with time, you sort of balance it out a bit more. But then, of course, if we look at the university, there's different fields within engineering where there's still very big difference
in pipeline that the women are falling off, sort of.
But I'm thinking, this is me thinking, but I mean, with STEM becoming more integrated as well, it's not only engineers working together. Today, engineers are working together with other professions, which means that there is also can be a balance because of the different professions itself.
Yeah, because it's more integrated groups, and that you, I agree. But it's obviously, you know, not very nice reading when you saw the curve and the number of harassments. It's something we need to work actively with as an employer to make sure that we prevent it.
Katarina, what do you say from now?
No, but I agree that, I mean, the employers, of course, have a very important role in this. It's they are the ones to having the influence in the workplace with the values and work methods. So I think many who have worked I, for example, I've worked in a very male-dominated area. It is different from when it's mixed, and it can pose certain challenges. And it's very important, sort of the leadership in those environments. But as you point out also, I mean, the more women, the more diverse it will become. So I think I agree, we've come some way, and we have to work on that together, so that women who educate themselves to become engineers don't choose to actually in the workplace do something else, or do work with topics in the workplace that are not very engineering heavy, so to say.
I would like to ask Anne and Anna back on stage, and also I would like to open the floor for questions and comments. So, yeah, we have one there.
Hi, my name is Linnea Sandström Lange. I work as a PR consultant at the Standard. Thank you so much for the presentation and for the interesting discussion. There are a lot of familiar things. I see this as a skills supply challenge for the future when we don't have enough girls going into STEM subjects, not just now, but also in the future. And previously, this has been viewed very much as a women's issue. And just looking around here in the audience, given the composition of the audience, I was wondering if this is still the case today, or are we seeing changes there too in management of business? Thank you.
Who would like to take that?
Yeah, I can. I can only speak for AstraZeneca, but I think it's a high engagement in this area among both our male employees and leaders and female. I also saw in the audience that it was female dominated, but I think this is a high topic for everyone because we want the best talents and we want the full potential of society. We don't want only a small part of society to be available as a workforce. We want the full potential. So we see, this as a business critical that we get diversity in all areas, both in the male-dominated and in the female-dominated areas, because diversity is crucial for us as an innovation-driven company, because we need different backgrounds, different aspects, different perspectives on the subjects that we work with to kind of drive the innovation. So for us, it's not something that we talk about on the side. This is kind of the business critical for us that we have diversity.
Another question.
I'm Christina Pontes from the Swedish Council for Higher Education. And I would like to touch upon a question. I feel that you have covered or you talked about the differences in different fields of engineering, of the amount of women or boys, and also what you talked about, that when you're working is more like a more integrated. So I'm thinking, do you think it's only a question of choice, or it's also what they're choosing too, a question of what we're offering? Is it that we have to change how the education offers? Should we have more integrated programs? Should we have differences in how engineering programs are offered, or even in upper secondary school? Should we see that in a different way, having a more general entry and trying to specialize after? How are your thoughts about that? Is it
Sara, and then maybe the Anna?
Well, I can answer when it comes to upper secondary school, because we have some programs, for example, nature, natur, where it is gender balanced. However, what we see from there is that a lot of those girls go into university, but they are not very much more likely to go into engineering than any other. I think percentage-wise for girls in university, it's about 15% that would take an engineering degree, and from the nature program, it's about 19%. So it's slightly higher, but not very much. So sure, but maybe, yeah. Well, I don't know if that answered the question.
Katarina, would you like to come in?
Yes, I mean, I think there is potential for sort of learning between universities, for example, in how you brand educations who apply. I know experiences, for example, from the higher vocational education in Sweden, Myndigheten för yrkeshögskolan, is that when they change the name of a particular program, it also changes who applies, and you can attract more women. And therefore, I think you have to raise the consciousness of that these things play a role in who actually, just the first step, who applies. And that I think there is potential for universities, for example, working more and learning from each other and how to increase the interest of women in certain educational programs.
Yeah, and once you have then attracted these girls to the educational program. I think an important part is also really to focus on the environment that they experience, so that we have also discussed. So you might be thinking about making sure that girls are in classes with other girls, maybe 50-50 boys, girls in those classes, and then there will be some classes with just boys. But like trying to make it a pleasant environment for those girls who actually choose it, to keep them in the environment. Because of course, like we can think of, ideally this is just a transition phase, because at some point, if it's equal how many boys and girls choose it, then we don't need to care about it. But until we get there, we might need to actually focus more on the experiences they get. Like also make sure there's not a poster of like something that is really clearly a male like environment. Like just like there is some research that has shown that this is important for keeping girls in the class or in the program.
Yeah, so I think this is really an interesting question about sort of degree of specialization and gender segregation. So there's a recent report by Karin Halldén and Anders Sandberg, an ESO report, which I can recommend everyone to read, about the segregated labor market in Sweden. And they really suggest that sort of increased specialization in education can lead to more segregation. As an example, they give this reform in the 90s in upper secondary school in Sweden, when we actually merged the natur och teknik, natural sciences and engineering program, and that immediately led to an increase in the share of girls choosing any of these programs. And then in the early 2000s, when they were sort of separated again, the share of girls decreased. And this is sort of a concrete example of where sort of decreased specialization early on leads to sort of more gender integration, if you will.
I mean, Anna, as you described, the Swiss system, which is of course very different from the Swedish in a number of ways, but you seem to have or in Switzerland, they seem to have a super ambitious student counseling at an early age for sort of what choices you make in order to make a certain career. And I mean, many of these interventions or sort of summer programs and extracurricular activities for both girls and boys about STEM, I think they're really relying on that your interest and passion, and it's cool to be a nerd, and I mean there shouldn't only be activities for sort of sporty people, but also for nerdy people, and sort of bringing out the STEM identity in people. But for me, I mean, you could also brand it as if you pursue an education within STEM, you will have a stronger, like, I mean, you will be likely to get a good job with a good pay. And so how student counseling in schools and this sort of mainstreaming and demystifying STEM occupations versus this follow your passion and be a nerd. What are your comments to those different paths?
I would think here that an important dimension is also to not really only focus on what is your passion, what is your preferences, because many students, they have preferences that are very gendered. Of course, it can be that this is the true preference, but to some extent, it's also something that is created by your environment during childhood. So you have been taught that girls are especially good at taking care of kids, taking care of sick people, etc. And that shapes your preferences, which might not be the true preferences. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important. So here also emphasizing more like, look, this is your grade. You are really good in math. Like that's a message that many teachers might need to emphasize even more for girls than for boys, because they don't trust it, or they might have a grade that is even better in languages. And then it's like a comparison of myself, like, okay, I'm better in language, so I shouldn't choose the math intense occupation, but maybe I'm good in both.
Mm.
So,
well, when I've been working with, like, I call it interventions here, but it was really like courses in programming, chemistry, basically the idea that you should be able to have science as an interest. So if you like football, you go and play football with your friends after school. If you like music, you go and play music with your friends after school. That you can also go and emerge in science after school because it's fun. But what we learned early on there is that, I mean, you don't really talk to the kids, you talk to the parents, right? Because those are the ones making the choices. And so now one thing we learned was that it's like all kids were interested once they got there. Like they didn't have to make the decision that this is something that I'm interested in. That you just show up and have fun, and then like by hands-on experience realize that this isn't that scary. But also, I mean, it's parents, right? So the second we called something programming, there would only be boys showing up. And they were like 7. So it wasn't that, you know, they cannot have been that interested in programming by that age, but their parents already made that choice for them. So.
Katarina, what is the role of student counseling and sort of guiding the pupils in well, doing what they are best at and also what might be good for them?
But it is, of course, important. Yesterday, I was at the Yrkes-SM in Karlstad, so a competition in occupational training. And there they had a busload of yrkesvägledare from Örebro showing up, going around looking at all these people competing in electronics and all sorts of different occupations. To actually understand what these occupations are about. It cannot be easy to be a yrkesvägledare. To guide, and the labor market is shifting quickly. So training for them is, of course, important. But I think also initiatives like Tekniksprånget, which is a paid 4 months internship for boys and girls in upper secondary education is important, because we see that women who have participated in them are more likely to actually choose a STEM career afterwards, or STEM studies, to actually for themselves see what is these occupations, to try them out. That is also a different way of guiding.
So sort of apprenticeship after gymnasium. We have a couple of questions. One here.
Yeah, hey. There's been a lot of recent theoretical developments in sociology, which places a lot of focus on the role of intimacy in social structures. You've heard the term intimacy capital being thrown around a lot recently, and I think this has some relevancy here. That students and a lot of the choices people make even in adulthood have a lot to do with maximizing your access to intimacy, and that this can play a role in why students choose the programs that they do. So to give a more example, which is directed towards males, because I know more about this, is that they won't choose these heels subjects so long as women don't perceive men who take these kind of jobs as being desirable or attractive mates. So there is this, and that males are quite aware of this, that they don't want to sort of bring themselves into a trajectory of intimacy poverty. So there is an emotional sphere to this as well. Do you think this has any relevancy or any significance, or?
I will let the researcher, so sort of your status on the sort of marriage market.
So I don't know of any economic research that has been touching on that, but I clearly imagine that this is something that is very relevant. So we know from the other side that like women, there is some evidence that women are thinking about the marriage market when they make their decisions. So I clearly can also imagine that this is the case for men. So there's really a need for more research on that. And I think that is also an obstacle. And then that's exactly the opening the next black box, like what can we do to change that perception? Because it's not just a policy that you need to implement. It's like people's perceptions, like the norms around it.
That might be why the parents make these preferences for choices for their children, because they want their children to get children in their turn. So we have one question, and I think that will be the final question.
Hello, my name is Elin, and thank you for this presentation and your interest in these topics. And I was wondering, as a girl going into engineering, what do you think we can do to make and see a difference?
Sara.
It's a great question. Well, congratulations on making a great choice to start with. And I think by going into the STEM subjects, you are already a role model. So I honestly don't want to put too much pressure on you. Like if you just go for your education, have fun, and go out and change, like, you know, do fun things, that in itself would be an inspiration. But I think for me, when I went into STEM subjects, because I like teaching, I like to also like pass that knowledge along to younger students. And that was one way that I did that when I was a student. But I think it's enough that you're, you know, pursuing engineering. That's yeah.
I agree. So you will obviously be a role model and inspiration for other girls to choose the same path. So I would just agree with you. And if there are, you know, activities where you can engage to show what the education is all about and to inspire others to choose the same, then that's great. But I don't think it's not only your responsibility to drive this question, but obviously you will be a role model and someone who can inspire others. So just encourage that.
I think that's a very optimistic way to end this seminar. A warm thank you to all our panel and to the audience. And before I let you out, I would like to suggest that you come back already tomorrow when we have a seminar about the expansion of higher education in Sweden to the whole of Sweden. I mean, the geographical expansion and the long-term effects of that. And also I would like to say that we have a few spots left on SMS education. We have 2 educational programs. One is executive education on governments from the local to the regional and national and EU level. And the other one is for younger talents in our member organizations to get to know more about how to channel their sort of engagement in society and meet a lot of experienced people from both policy, research, and business. So if you know somebody, or if you yourself is any of these groups, please don't hesitate to apply. Thank you.